Hi, I'm Renée Walker, a mindset mentor, speaker, and lover of all things spiritual. I believe that at our core, we are all spiritually wired for love, peace, success, and abundance. Here on the podcast, we're diving into mindset, wellness, and business, but always through a spiritual lens. Let's just say we're going deep, but we're keeping it light. So let's elevate your life from the inside out, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. I have the honor of having the lovely, the beautiful Ashley Deland with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashley.
Oh my goodness, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
I am so looking forward to this conversation. You have been a part of my world in many ways, but for those listeners who are here with us and maybe do not know Ashley, she is a strategic business advisor for female founders who specializes in marketing, branding, and business development. She is also the founder and CEO of Maison, a full-service creative design house that supports lifestyle brands and founders alike through comprehensive done-for-you services. And really, Ashley is a powerhouse.
Thanks, Bill.
I'm so happy to have you here. And I mean, I love when you are, when you get ready for a podcast and you're like, oh, there's so many different ways we could go here. And that is sort of like we were chatting before the recording that we're just going to let it flow and see what shows up. You have been a part of, we've known each other for a number of years, sort of like in and out in different capacities. But I have really witnessed you step up in like a really intentional way. Maybe these past couple of years is when we've really sort of connected. And I would say that you are a woman on a mission is from my standpoint what I am seeing. And I just could not be cheering you on anymore. I love seeing women show up in big ways. And for you, just to give people an idea, it's been, you've also recently launched a podcast. Mm-hmm. She Wears the Pants. You've launched a clothing line. You've been really doing a lot of events. You are about to launch a collaborative book. Mm-hmm. You have your, as we just talked about, your marketing business, your coaching business, and on top of that, you're a mom to a two and a half year old. So there is a lot going on in your world. So I guess my first question to you would be how do you choose what you say yes to? How do you sort of make those decisions? What are the projects that you are feeling compelled or guided to work on? I'd love to hear more, if there's a process or if it's more intuitive or how do you choose your yeses?
There's a lot of intentional alignment behind every single decision that I make. Every single one is actually strategic in order for me to lean into that larger vision. I have this vision of creating this ecosystem for women, not just a business, not just a marketing agency, an ecosystem where they can find themselves in need for funding, for education, for advisory, for community. So on a daily basis, I have to set very clear boundaries with clients, with community, with family, with friends, that if it doesn't align to the vision, then it's a no for me, with a lot of love. But I always say now that you have the vision and you need the provision. So everything is so intentional with every single step. And there are moments that I want to go out and have drinks with girlfriends or go to this event, but I just remember at the end of the day that I'm working towards a bigger purpose and I have to stay in that alignment.
Love that answer. And actually, that was going to be sort of where I was going to go after. It's like the no's are actually oftentimes more important than the yeses too, right? Sort of like setting those boundaries. And I know what I've experienced personally is like as you show up more and as you start to build, the opportunities and the asks, just there's more and more of them. So it requires really being intentional, as you said, with what you say yes to, so that you don't get distracted. And I guess it's so easy to be distracted. So I admire how you're able to stay focused on that vision.
It's really important that I build a legacy. Yeah, I just know that it's part of my purpose and my potential and possibility that I was gifted with this gigantic vision, and I have to stay dedicated, unwavering faith towards it, because I know the impact and service for women that's going to come from it. When you look beyond just yourself and you know that you're being used for a greater purpose, it's easier to let go of the hardship and the human emotion that comes with having to say no or missing out or feeling like, all the beliefs. I always say the beliefs enter the room before you do, right? Mm-hmm. So when you know you've been given something so huge, you understand the sacrifice that has to come with it as well.
Mm-hmm. And I know you speak a lot, like you're a big believer in the importance of like placing your mindset, like your mindset being so important. And just as you were sharing now, so are there like some specific mindset shifts that you've been very much like working on? Do you still feel those limiting beliefs coming, or what's been your process, your transformation around that?
I'm an advocate that if you don't have any form of fear or limiting belief, then you're not stretching yourself far enough. And I know that they will always be around me because the expansion is always so scary for me. But what I'm actively working on right now is stepping deeper into the power of vulnerability, because it's something that I have been avoiding for many years. And it was only in 2024 that I started building out my personal board of directors with a fierce dedication, and majority of them saying like, it's time for you to step deeper into that feminine energy, and that involved the power of vulnerability. And in a traditional role, I used to think, because I sit in a lot of male energy, it's business and strategy and advisory, I used to think that vulnerability was almost seen as like a victimhood or a weakness or a sad storytelling, but it's actually the complete opposite, because it's really difficult to be that courageous, to be that raw, that transparent. So part of my mindset has been to really lean forward in a direct and truthful way towards the dreams and the desires and the destiny, even when it becomes uncomfortable. And to me, that's what vulnerability is defined as in my world. It's the willingness and courage to share those things and step even deeper into them. And I have found that shifting into vulnerability and honing in on that mindset this past year has allowed me to connect with people on such a deeper level, because there's no facade. There's no, I don't have to lead with anything but myself. And that has allowed me to go so much deeper, so much faster in the right relationships. And beyond like the power of proximity and relationship capital and all those abundant words, it actually just has helped me gain sisterhood all over the world, which is just so important to me.
Yeah, it's amazing how it deepens the connection, right? And when you are someone who is so sort of like strong, and you have a strong energy, and I mean that like in the most loving, beautiful way, it can sometimes like make people feel like, oh, she's got this, like she's got it all, figured out. And without realizing, it prevents a little bit that level of connection. I know when you launched your podcast, you really you went right for that vulnerability factor and shared some really big moments and traumas from your childhood. So what was that experience like? Because I know, and we don't have to go into all of it, or we can. I know it's in that first episode of She Wears the Pants, so I highly encourage our listeners to go back and listen to that episode, because it was so beautiful the way that you shared it. But what was that experience in opening yourself up in that way? Like, that was quite deep, right? And I can just imagine the amount of fear and everything sort of showing up, I'm sure, right before you did the interview, and then probably as it was getting ready to go online and be shared with the world.
Yeah, vulnerability asks a lot from us. It really does. It has to be a deliberate lean in as opposed to a breakdown. And it took me years and years to deliberately lean into that form of vulnerability. A lot of therapy, a lot of healing, a lot of, again, the right people on my bench, the right people on my personal board of advisors. To be fully transparent, I was having some incredible amounts of anxiety and panic attacks leading up. It was vulnerable to even get into the recording studio, which we had nothing planned. It was similar to this. Like, I just want to be as transparent and authentic and flow and ease as possible. And then leaving it, I was like, yes, Ashley, good for you. I'm so proud of you. But then when it was coming to air, it was a whole other whack of emotions, because it's one thing to get into the studio. It's another to then provide it on a silver platter to the lovers and the haters of your world, and especially your family members, a lot of people that did not want, that to be aired.
Yeah.
And that was it, a whole other beast in itself. However, I placed a bet on myself, and I stepped into the limelight, not knowing what was on the other side. They say, Ed Millett has this quote where race drivers always have to keep pushing through the cloud of smoke, never knowing what's on the other side. And that was the whole imagery that I had for that podcast. I just have to push through, not knowing if there's a crash on the other side, if I'm going to hit a wall, or if it's going to be flow and ease. But the response that I received, and not that I was even looking for one, but I was blessed to receive messages from hundreds of women around the world just thanking me for stepping into that power of vulnerability, because it almost acted like permission for them to step into their story and to rewrite the way their traumas have turned into now triumphs, which was my intention, was to not sit in victimhood, but to sit in a victor mentality. And really, from that very uncomfortable stretch, that led to co-authoring a book with 24 other women, in which has become a powerhouse in itself, really, but is now going to be a tangible item that is going to serve women around the world in so many different communities, which is better than I could have ever even imagined.
Yeah, and it's when you have the willingness to open yourself in that way, it's like, even though not everyone has had the same experiences as you've had, we can all see each other in some way, right? And all of it's the emotions around certain aspects of our lives that maybe we are ashamed of, so it's like you're doing all these great things, and then there's a part of you, and I say that like of us, right? Because everyone is sort of like can find themselves in that place where it's like we show up so much, and then if there's that part of you that you're like hiding, then it's just taking away from your opportunity to just be fully you. And what like a relief to just be like, here it is. Like, you don't have to, like, you're not doing it, as you said, for any external validation, but more for your own inner healing, and that like letting go of that block and allowing for yourself to just be fully you. And then it gives permission to everyone around you. And then we have now we get the full Ashley, which to me is like, that's the gift, right? When we allow ourselves to be fully vulnerable in that way.
It's also, you can't ask your students, your clients, your friends, the loves of your life to lead when you haven't led yourself down that path,
Yeah.
right? So it's really important that, you know, not just as a coach or a guide or, you know, someone who assists, I have to do the hard work first in order to properly mentor somebody else or to guide them to their next level beyond just a business, even as
Yeah.
on a friendship or as a family. Don't ask somebody else to do the work if you're not willing to do it yourself first.
Beautiful. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you, because I don't even know if you are aware of this, but you and I, so we've, have had the pleasure of doing some events and together, and then I have done some coaching with you, and I remember we had a call together. So where I'm getting to is that this podcast, like, you were a big part of me launching this podcast. And I remember we had a call, and you're looking stuff. And if you know Ashley, in her loving way, you said, why don't you have a podcast? I don't get it. Like, I don't understand. Like, you're a good speaker. You do all those things. Why don't you have a podcast? Like, it doesn't make sense. And I remember being like, and just feeling the resistance in my body. Like, my whole body just like went, not liking where you were going. And then I'm like, I can hear myself share back, oh, well, I was going to launch a podcast a number of years ago, and then, like, there was all these things going on, and so I'm listening to myself as I'm sharing, and it's like every reason why and all of the excuses and everything. And anyhow, we ended the call, and I sort of didn't think about it after, but that was like, now it's like, when you say in hindsight you can look back, and I'm like, in hindsight I can look back, and that was like the reawakening of that, like, yeah, what are you waiting? Why don't you have a podcast? Like, what are the reasons? And all of the reasons I remember I was listening to they didn't even make sense. It was just, to me, again, sort of like I don't know if it was a playing small or whatever it may be, but I want to thank you, because I don't know if you know that this was like an instigator to doing this, to putting myself out there in this way.
Well, I'm a very big cheerleader for you. I think you are an exceptional human coach, mindset mentor, and a microphone always needs to be in front of you. So I'm happy that masculine energy showed some resistance in you, because isn't resistance the most beautiful gift sometimes? Because it really uncovers the why, but also the beliefs that come up. That's why the mantra in 2024 was, if it makes you want to throw up, you have to go in that direction. And for you, that would be if resistance shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like, and it really is a mindset shift, and learning to see that resistance as like a teacher, right? If I'm resisting it, it means like this is actually the opportunity for me to grow. It's my opportunity to expand, because I'm feeling the resistance. So the resistance is actually showing me where I'm, and of course there's like, it's never a black and white, and there's like opportunities to explore that more in some cases, but it's not always easy though, is it?
That's right. But also for you, you really do walk the walk. Like, you lead in service, not in sales. And this is just another way for you to do that, to lead in service by sharing your knowledge and sharing your expertise. And I bet a lot of money that this is serving so many people.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for being you, because so let's sort of go into that feminine, masculine energy, because I would say that personally, I lead more in a feminine energy, and so I need the masculine energy. And then I know that you've shared that you are more naturally in your masculine energy, and so you've been working towards the feminine energy. And so to me, it's like balance is about really bringing the two together. It's not that one is better than the other, because because now there's a lot of talk about being in your feminine energy, and I can say yes, and you also need the masculine energy to like get stuff done. So what's that journey been for you, and sort of like maybe even recognizing that there was space for inviting more feminine energy, and what that looks like in your business, in your life?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Being raised by a single mother, I really had to step up also as a parent and almost adapt to being the father of the family and of myself. And then that really led me to taking charge in a corporate way. So when I was, working for Moses, and these huge corporate roles, I was still sitting in a lot of masculine energy. I would say that I lived in that energy throughout all of the restaurants or yoga studios, and it wasn't until really giving birth to Havy did I realize the power of the feminine energy. Even throughout my pregnancy, I was still really sitting in like strategy and go-getting and just pushing down walls, just a lot of heavy male energy. Giving birth to Havy allowed me to soften and step into that womanhood, that beauty, that power that comes in that feminine energy, where before I would think, oh, like feminine energy is taking a bath or like being at the park with your kids. Like I had a really disordered view of
Yeah.
what feminine energy was. And which is ironic because I serve women all day long. I just felt like I had to be so aggressive with creating the right rooms and community and just, it was too unleveled in my opinion. But after giving birth to Havy, I really sat in understanding that my power comes from feminine, and it comes from being a woman, and it comes with the sisterhood and the ability to birth a human. And, so to me, stepping into that feminine energy the past almost 3 years now has been a softening, has led to vulnerability, has led to deeper relationships with women, and a balance of bringing on an NLP practitioner, right? Bringing on a mindset mentor at a different caliber, and being so fiercely dedicated to stacking self-mastery items on my list as opposed to just business items so that I can start contributing at a higher level. It's about journaling now. It's about affirmations. It's about, for me, stepping deeper into my faith. There's so many ways that I have allowed myself to lean into that feminine energy that has made me a better human, a better mother, a better business owner, and a better sister to the world. But it's been hard.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a commitment, just like anything, right? When you make a decision, and when you are like, anytime when we're speaking of mindset and we're speaking of transformation, it's never a one-time thing. It's a constant invitation to bring more of that energy into your life. And it's interesting how it's like, okay, if we're more wired in one way, then that tends to be where we go, and there's nothing wrong with that, because the way in which we're wired is perfect, and it's exactly what we need, and we get to also sort of like bring in the different or nurture some of the different aspects of us so that we feel, and also I would say over time, right? As you said, like it's like becoming a mom was like one of those moments where you just felt that shift in you. And I think that that's another important thing to recognize, is we have like certain times in our lives where we're maybe being called to bring more of ourselves in different ways.
Absolutely. It's almost like we get to unravel these different, hopefully higher, newer versions of yourself with every kind of season or challenge or difficulty or blessing. Avy was a blessing, and for 6 years we couldn't get pregnant. So that almost pushed me further into masculine. And then to have this gigantic blessing, allowed me to soften into feminine, and that's usually what you get served in life, is whatever you need to uncover that next version of yourself.
Yeah, and that's the surrendering piece, right? That we
So
talk
much.
about, and it's probably, and in a masculine energy, the surrendering is even harder, right? Because surrendering, the masculine energy comes with a lot of like the doing and the more sort of like controlling of it.
Yes.
So the surrendering piece can sort of like really, I'm sure you feel sort of that resistance, but how beautiful that you've been able to kind of bring it more into your life. And I felt that, like I've seen that in you, that shift in just the way, and it's, you know, like when I was saying, the thing is for me personally, I needed that little push, right? So it's like that, it's not changing who you are, because who you are is exactly who we need. And it's just like bringing that softer, the word softness that you said, I think is such like a great way to describe that. You mentioned your faith, and you know, since this is the Spiritually Wired podcast, I'm wondering like what has, because I know that you've had a lot of shifts in your life, and your relationship with God, with Source, has changed over time. So I would love for you, can you tell us a little bit more about what that has been like for you and where you're at today?
I'd say my relationship with faith is a little bit more complicated than perhaps the average person. Being born and raised on a generational level within a cult has really given me a great advantage on how I now see my relationship with God. However, it has taken me many, many years to get to this point. Being in that organization really suppressed women's voices, their freedom, their abilities, and classified them in pretty much two roles: to have children or to go door to door. That was the only future that you had. So being raised in that environment and seeing that not just within those four walls, but within your home and generationally on a level that was uninspiring, unmotivating, unempowering, allowed me to become such a fierce advocate for women and freedom and choices and their voices, which is why I do what I do. After getting kicked out of that organization and having the freedom that I did, it was really easy for me to turn my back to God, because it was just another white man who controlled me. And it took me, oh my goodness, maybe 15 years to reintroduce my relationship to God on a different level. And that only happened after the death of Mary, of my best friend, when I was just trying to run away from all of the people showing up at the door and you know, all the blessings at the time. But it was too much for me to handle. And then tuning into Joel Osteen, and then it shifting my entire trajectory in my life. My husband has been a fierce advocate and loyal follower of God. His relationship with him is beautiful in its entity. I would say that it was about that time that Mary passed away that I just listened to Joel Osteen, started tapping into God, and it has led me into the most beautiful, ever-evolving relationship that I think I've ever had, and I ever will have, besides Ryan and Haven. Now, I'm ironically a fierce advocate for promoting to people that you don't have to be defined in what you see as faith and religion within your own life. My office faces a church. So I actually stare at a church all day long, and that is intentional for this office. You don't have to go there to serve, to speak, to be guided. I have reconstructed my own relationship as a child of God, and he's very prominent in my daily life, my hours, my moments. That's why I mentioned before how, for me, stepping more into my feminine energy was actually leaning deeper into faith. It was because I now operate out of flow and ease because I allow him to guide me. And it has been a really complicated journey, but you can show up how you want to God, and it doesn't have to be through reading a book. It doesn't have to be through going to a church. It can be however you want him to be of service to you. So a little bit of a different story.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing it, because I think that there are so many people who I'm sure can relate to that, right? Having more of a negative experience with, again, it's like when we view God in a religion is where it sort of like changes the way our perception of God. So it's interesting that when we can sort of like let go of the walls that religion can create, and we're not here to judge in any way, because for some people, having a specific religion only strengthens their relationship with God, and that's amazing when you can find that. But for others, it really is like a rediscovering of what faith is and what your relationship with God is now. And to me, it's like something that I remember. So I grew up in the Catholic Church, and my aunt, she had her kids, so my cousins, were baptized like much later in life. And her thing was like, no, because I want them to make the decision. And I thought, well, isn't that a cool way to do it? Because for most people, right, we don't choose. It's just what you're born into, and then you take on the different beliefs around, and we're not necessarily asked or encouraged to question those. It's just what is. So when later in life you have an opportunity to come back to it in a way that serves who you are in this moment and the values that you have, that is just so incredibly, what a gift. It's so empowering to look at it that way.
It is. It has, I always say that like faith and fear take the same amount of energy at the end of the day. But if you know that, God is within you, then you also know that you cannot fail, and whatever happens to you is meant to happen for you, not to you. To this day, I will not pick up a Bible. I was baptized 4 months ago in the privacy of my home with a pastor who is a friend to us, and that was just my dedication to God, not a religion. Ironically, because it's perfect timing, this past weekend, Ryan asked me, and he asks me every weekend, do you want to come to church with me? And every weekend I say no, but for some reason this Sunday I was like, yeah, okay, let's try it out. And it was a horrible experience for me. It was awful. I had instant regret the moment he had his hand on that door, and there was this timer in front of me because we were up at the top, and I was counting down the seconds, just sweating in panic and shaking and just being, this is not for me. And I ended up leaving and just jetting outside to go for a walk up and down the street. And I was like, okay, you know what? I tried it and it's still not for me. Yeah. So you just have to speak to God and have him be in your life in however it relates to you. There are no rules.
But amazing that you, like, again, as you said, it's like you don't know until you tried it, and you went, and it's like, yeah, nope, still not resonating. So I'm going to push pause on that for now. And isn't it like interesting when we talk about like the universe, God working for us, right? The fact that you your partner and the person that you married is so based in faith when you were so resistant of it. I mean, obviously,
I know.
it's so obvious that there was a reason for that, right? There was an aspect of his faith that maybe you couldn't see in the beginning, but clearly that was a part of him that attracted you to him and why you were together, and how we get to heal each other in relationships, that we don't, it's all happening unconsciously, of course, in the beginning, but that's a cool part too.
Yeah, Ryan's been a huge part of not obviously my life, but he's my biggest cheerleader. He's my best friend. He's the best business partner, and he has healed me in so many ways on behalf of men worldwide. It's not even funny. So he's a good soul, that one.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. And I love how you get to, again, in your own way, redefine what marriage looks like and what the roles are. And that is so important that we get to choose. We get to choose
Right.
how we show up in life, and what, so often, sadly, it's like we just do what's expected, and we just sort of like follow what everyone else is doing. And so it takes so much courage, speak of vulnerability, but also courage to do things differently, to be sort of that leader in the way in which you do things, which you are.
Thank you. It is, vulnerability takes more courage than anything else. And I feel like I am just put on this earth to some extent to show people that you don't have to follow in line, that you don't have to take those roles on if they don't serve you, from faith to business to marriage. We have completely untraditional roles within our marriage. In business, I operate very differently, and it's the same way in faith. And I'm just demonstrating that you have to do what serves your soul, and how you can serve yourself to contribute at that highest level of yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when I'm with you, it's like I feel this, like you are a big thinker. You think big, right? You have this big vision, and you shared it with us. I mean, it's a big vision. So for those listening who may have that big vision, do you have any sort of advice on keeping, because to me it's like, here's the downside, and I relate to the thinking big because it's in me as well. It's also easy to just go crazy and maybe like go full on in the working towards the vision, and it's easy to lose parts of ourselves in it. And so the work, I know for me personally, has been to find, and I'm not a fan of balance, because it's not necessarily, balance. There is no balance when you're thinking big, but also sort of not losing yourself, your faith, your moments of just stillness and presence, and your health, like all of those aspects. And I know that I can say that personally, that's where sometimes I feel the challenge is, like it's so easy to flip to the other side, and so I have to be very intentional. And you've been someone to tell me, like, Renee, you can't keep giving, and I'm like, Ashley, you can't keep giving. You need to look after yourself. So have you, and maybe you haven't figured it out yet. I don't know, but I'm asking where you're at with that. And if you do have any advice, or, yeah.
Ultimately, what has helped me stay so relentlessly focused on that ecosystem and that vision is really leaning into stacking promises to myself, and knowing that in each day of being an entrepreneur, from 1 minute to the next, one call to the next, there's this ebb and flow, there's this up and down, and you just show up to be of service to your clients, to investors, to the world, really, because when you're in the office, you're available for people. In the morning, you need to stack the promises in terms of like the micro steps. every morning, my first thing is I must sit in prayer. I must sit in silence and stillness in order to speak to my Creator. I then journal. And then from there, I have excerpts from books that I sit in the sauna, and I'm just in this place of knowing that I'm setting myself up through stacking those promises first and foremost to then be able to take the chaos that is entrepreneur throughout the day. So stacking promises is huge. Micro steps, understanding that the big vision actually just has to be broken down into micro steps, and then holding yourself accountable to taking those few steps forward and then literally crossing them off as a win, right? And speaking of wins, like the macro wins are also really important, because if you're not celebrating yourself along the journey, then your head is down and you're not looking at the beauty that surrounds you through all of these accomplishments. So the vision is a blessing. The provisions are where, on a human level, you have to stack your own promises first and foremost, hold yourself accountable. You have to take the micro steps to digest how to get and accomplish that giant vision. And then the macro wins are so important. Don't forget that this is your lifetime. You were put in this body, in this geographical location, with this passion, with this purpose for a reason. So celebrate the steps, celebrate yourself along the way.
I love that. I'm really going to receive that, and I hope everyone listening can receive that. And the stacking your promises, like, that is really speaking to me too. It's like we can use sometimes the word like non-negotiables, or what are the things that rituals you're doing, but something about calling them those promises, like, then that is something that you are doing for yourself. And what an active way of loving yourself too, because we see self-love as this, like, sort of like, ooh, let's go take a bath or book a massage, but really we love ourselves by showing up and keeping our promises to ourselves. So that is so beautiful, and I think a perfect way to end this beautiful podcast episode. Thank you so much, Ashley. I mean, I do love to end, and we sort of went there already a little bit, but I love to end by just asking what spirituality means to you.
Spirituality to me is the act of being in service unselfishly. So being led to the good of human. And a lot of people say spirituality is a solo internal thing. I think spirituality is being able to come together as humans and to be spiritually connected through acts of service, through unselfish ways of bringing community together, of operating out of love. And what a beautiful blessing spirituality can be at the end of the day, right? Because it can bring people together at levels that are so in-depth and so profound. But to me, it's all coming out of service.
What a beautiful answer. I don't think I've heard that one. So being of service, that is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know that we're going to have many people who are like, how do I get my hands on this girl? What is the best way for people to connect with you?
Instagram is the easiest way, at Ashley Deland, DELAND, or you can find me at my website, ashleydeland.com.
Amazing. And you have so much good things happening now that are going to continue to happen. We're going to link to your website, your Instagram in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, my love.
Thank you. And I want to remind everyone that you are spiritually wired always, for love, for success, for abundance, for faith, right? For big thinking, for dreaming, for showing up big for yourself, and for all those promises that you are making for yourself. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Spiritually Wired. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review. It really makes a big difference for the podcast. And if you're ready to dive deeper and join a soul-led community, come be a part of the Spiritually Wired membership. With weekly live lessons and a rich library of recorded classes, it's designed to support you every step of the way on your spiritual journey. We currently have a special offer where you can receive your first month for half the price. You can find a link in the show notes or come check it out at reneewalkerwellness.com. Until next time, remember to take some deep breaths. Remember that you are spiritually wired.